Welcome back to the Global Agriculture Innovation Forum and our final session focusing on innovations in information and communication technology in agriculture. I'm Gerald Shively, Associate Dean and Director of the Office of International Programs in the College of Agriculture at Purdue University, your host for this year-long series of forum events. On behalf of the organizing committee, our advisory group, and everyone working to make this forum possible, I'd like to welcome you. I'd also like to thank USDA, especially the Foreign Agricultural Service, for their ongoing support of these forum events. Today's panelists will be discussing ways that ICT can help promote a wide range of connections within agricultural systems. To lead the discussion, I'm pleased to introduce the moderator for this session, Dr. Tamara Jackson, Program Manager at ACIAR, the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research, and Visiting Research Fellow at the University of Adelaide. I hope you enjoy the program. Please engage with our panel by entering questions in the Q&A box. We will answer as many questions as time permits during the live question and answer session that will follow the presentations.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, wherever you might be in the world. As I'm in Australia, I just wanted to start, as is customary, to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land the meeting's been held on. And for me, I would like to acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. Now, I know that those of us on the call today are all too aware of the complex challenges facing the food system across the world and the need for those systems to change. And at the same time, we're all aware that there are lots of technologies and approaches and innovations that are being implemented with success in farming communities and agricultural systems around the world. So there's never been more information available or a more diverse range of stakeholders engaged in the agricultural sector. And this creates conditions for change and innovation, where connections and knowledge flows between an increasingly diverse set of actors are becoming even more important. And we know too that networks of stakeholders are needed for effective innovation to occur. That is, for new ways of doing to not only be identified, but very critically to also be applied. So the adoption and integration of ICTs has reduced information and transaction costs, improved service delivery, created new jobs, generated new revenue streams, and saved resources. And in this session, my colleagues and I are really pleased to be able to share some experiences that have been funded by the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research in South Asia, and with partners in parts of our projects, and there's a particular focus on work in the Eastern Gangetic Plains. And the work included shows a diversity of experiences in strengthening connections, both between research, extension, farmers and markets, to manage information, input supplies and market links. And it shows, we have also an example of how ICT can help with managing groundwater resources, connecting groundwater resources and end users. So a reminder, please add questions in the chat box, and together with the panel, we'll address these questions after all the presentations have been, we've had all the presentations. We have 5 speakers tonight: Dr. Brendan Brown from CIMMYT, Ms. Emma Karki, also from CIMMYT, Professor Ram Dutt, Associate Professor in the School of Agribusiness Management in the Central Agricultural University in India, Mr. Shashank Kumar, co-founder and CEO of DeHart, and Professor Basant Maheshwari from Western Sydney University. So I'll first hand over to Dr. Brendan Brown from CIMMYT, who'll give an overview of how one Research for Development project incorporated both ICT research and interventions to increase connectivity for scaling. So over to you, Brendan.
Thanks very much, Tamara, and thanks to Purdue University for setting up this forum and for giving us the chance to talk about how information and communication technologies were used to increase connectivity between stakeholders in the scaling phase of our SRFSI project. So just a bit of background first. SURFSI is the Sustainable and Resilient Farming Systems Intensification in the Eastern Gangetic Plains project. Essentially, over the space of about 8 years, we were seeking to find more productive, profitable, and resilient farming systems. We did that based in conservation agriculture-based sustainable intensification practices. We worked across 3 countries, in the eastern Nepal Terai, in Bihar and West Bengal in India, and then in northern Bangladesh. We're funded, of course, through the Australian government. Now, SRFSI is not a scaling project per se. It's actually gone through 3 phases, which primarily was an agronomy project, and then a capacity development project, and then the 3rd phase, of which I've been responsible for, is the scaling phase. So when I took over, one of the big questions that I had, in light of our aim of widespread CASI adoption, was what was the role of ICT in scaling CASI, and particularly in improving connectivity between stakeholders? And we asked that particularly in light of sustainability. Coming to the end of a long project, what role did ICT have in making sure that what we'd done was sustainable over the long term? Now, in terms of our ICT agenda, we are a research for development project, so we tried to cover both angles. We have our research side and our intervention side. On the research side, first up, we wanted to understand what would make a successful ICT intervention in terms of design features. And secondly, understanding how farmers would like to interact with such interventions, and particularly more deeply around how information preference and sources are working. On the intervention side, we had these 5 elements. We'll hear from Shashank, who talks about the DHART app. We'll also hear later from Ram to talk about the massive online open course that we supported. And we'll hear from Emma around a visual training syllabus for CASI. I'll briefly then talk about our WhatsApp and Facebook interventions and our web repository. In terms of the design of digital extension tools, we supported research led by Sam Coggins of the Australian National University. What we tried to do here was look at the processes through which these tools have and have not been used by farmers and other extension actors in low and middle income countries. And this was done through interviewing 40 app developers and more than 100 users of digital extension tools. The key findings. Firstly, we identified 15 pitfalls that are commonly constraining the use of digital extension tools by farmers. Secondly, these pitfalls often explain why women, less educated and less wealthy farmers tend to use these tools less, and why user-driven tools such as phone calls or chat apps are often used more than externally driven tools such as specialized smartphone apps. Thirdly, users often make and not just find these tools, they have to have space to create room and innovate within these tools. And finally, we identified the crucial need of users to be involved in the development process of these tools. And you can find all of this in much more detail than I have time for now in the Journal of Global Food Security. Now, this is something I find personally really interesting around what is the demand for digital agri-advisory services. So what we have here on the left side is current source, and on the right side is preferred source of information related to the zero tillage machinery across the Eastern Gangetic Plains. Now, important to note here that the Internet Digital Agri-Advisory Services apps, they're neither the current main source or the preferred source of information. But when we think about the learnings of our design survey, what we see is that farmer groups, local institutions, other farmers, they are the preferred source. So how do you integrate this into the design of various interventions? I think that's really a key learning. Now, the other thing that we see is across our 5 key surveyed locations, there's a lot of diversity around information systems, around main source and preference. For instance, the yellow you see in Rajshahi, government extension, both the main current and preferred source of information. There, it's probably not the ideal breeding ground for a successful digital agri-advisory service. However, if you look at a place like Malda, where you have lots of blue in the farmer groups and lots of red, local institutions, lots of green in the other farmers as preferred sources, this highlights that there are places where we are probably, if we can get the tool right, going to have more success with these sorts of interventions. Quickly, some other elements before I pass on to colleagues. The first one is our use of WhatsApp and Facebook as these digital interfaces for connectivity between researchers, development agents, service providers, and farmers. So we have these various groups that are relatively frequented and a good sharing platform to bring people together and to share information and increase that connectivity. Another ICT initiative we have is the development of a web repository at srfsi.cimet.org. In designing this, we didn't want this to be a project web page. We wanted it to be a really targeted repository of information. So on the home page, we have these 5 categories: farmer, service provider, extension services, policymaker, researcher. Basically, tell us who you are, tell us the information that you want, and we can deliver it to you in a really targeted way. Importantly, we also have this in 4 languages, so English, Bangla, Hindi, and Nepali, to try and make it as accessible as possible to our stakeholders, increasing that connectivity. And finally, a little bit of app development that we worked on. Now, you'll hear from Shashank shortly about the DHeart app, but we also tried a different app as well with DreamWorks Solutions Digakrishi, available in Nepal. And this was very much an information-based service as opposed to DHeart, which really tries a broader integration. So there's some learnings that we've had around different apps that have come. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for their time and hand over to colleagues for a little bit more information on some of our other initiatives.
Thanks, Brendan, for that, for setting the scene of the project of the Sustainable and Resilient Farming Systems Intensification Project. And we have now a chance to hear from other colleagues for a bit more detail on some of these. So I'd like to hand over now to Ms. Emma Karki, who is a Senior Research Officer with CIMET Nepal, to talk in a bit more detail about the development of a visual syllabus for sustainable capacity building. Thanks, Emma.
The CASI Visual Syllabus was developed as a CERFSI legacy product and is part of our sustainability strategy to provide easy, accessible information regarding CASI. Based on our research finding, information is still a major constraint for all current and future farmers. Lack of information is also a significant reason for not practicing CASI. Therefore, we developed a different approach to address this knowledge gap, which will remain accessible once the project ends as well. We followed a participatory approach to develop this. Farmers were asked to identify commonly encountered issues related to CASI, and they also expressed the need to develop videos to increase CASI awareness in their communities. Farmers were asked if they were able to access information on digital platforms such as cell phones. Local partners were consulted to identify additional topics and verify topics suggested by farmers to ensure regional commonality. Representatives were then invited to Cooch Behar to develop script for each videos and ensure local contextualization and nuances are accurately represented. Local partners and CERFSI staff then worked alongside Connor Ashley, our filmmaker, to build on existing knowledge management skills. We sought machinery support from SSCOP and engaged with farmers from CERFSI communities to identify potential candidates to feature in our video production. Farmers and service providers participated in acting exercises guided by Connor. Members of CERFSI and SSCOP were present throughout the filming process to ensure accurate field representation. Post-production included script translation to English and Hindi, and all videos were released with 3 language options. We wanted to take you along the journey of this process. Local partners were heavily involved in the process, from early morning warm-up exercises to roundtable discussions. Script Productions took a hands-on approach, and by the end of it, some of our team members became celebrities in Cooch Behar. The photo on the bottom right corner was displayed at one of Connor's local dinner cafe in Cooch Behar, and it might still be there. Connor was also an integral part of the training and filming process. He often got up close and personal with local partners, farmers, and ensured we maintain that bottom-up approach all throughout. Through our videos, we tried to make an effort to move away from conventional training videos that are already available. We wanted to focus more on the process of change farmers typically experience when they adopt CASSI. Farmers expressed being ridiculed by community members initially, which slowly changed towards appreciation once they observed crop growth. Demonstration on farmers' field is therefore critical to validate and build community trust of new technology. This highlights the importance of agents of change in bringing behavioral change for technologies such as CASSI that are counterintuitive to conventional practices. Similarly, CASSI also provides a potential income-generating opportunities for farmers in a position to invest and become service providers. Here also, there is a level of hesitancy due to the risks involved in using new technology. We showcase the importance of receiving guidance and advice to weigh the risks and benefits associated. This video also provides important pointers to avoid common mistakes and ensure efficient service provision for happy and satisfied customers. We also developed a series of short and direct how-to videos that takes a step-by-step approach to cover topics based on the most commonly identified issues regarding implementation and troubleshooting of CA machinery. This is suitable for both farmers and service providers. I invite you to have a look at these videos and provide any feedback to us. Through these videos, we address the existing knowledge gap for all users, which is readily available post-CERF-C. This type of information limits misinformation and is particularly useful in areas with limited access and engagement with extension services. Our videos are available on a public platform to remove barriers associated with formal training participation and literacy. We had plans to showcase these videos in CERF-C communities via BAU Filming Bus to gain feedback from the farmers themselves. Plans were also in place to develop further chapters on these topics for Kharif season. However, due to COVID, these plans could not be implemented. Our videos are available through our website and on YouTube. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma, for giving us the details behind the visual syllabus there. And I'd just like to remind everyone, if you've got questions for either a specific panelist or either a kind of a more general question that you'd like the panel to answer, please put that in the Q&A window. Thank you very much. We'll continue this theme a little bit now and hear from Professor Ramdat about a MOOC developed by Bihar Agricultural University and CIMMYT, which aim to make learning about CASSI more accessible and connect CASSI to more people. Over to you now. Thank you, Ram.
Hello, friends. Suppose you have been following a practice since generation after generation. Someday someone tells you this is not a right procedure. What will be your reaction? Same thing happened with us also. We started our journey of promotion of conservation agriculture around 8 years ago, and it was kind of same thing, because among the farming communities there is a perception for higher productivity or higher yield they have to go for more number of ploughing. And suddenly we started talking about that minimum disturbance of soil you can grow crop, and it was a kind of unbelievable things for them. At the same time, it was challenging for us also. Under Sustainable and Resilient Farming System Intensification for Eastern Gangetic Plains project, we launched this promotion of conservation agriculture, and this project was implemented in 3 countries including India, Nepal and Bangladesh. So you can see this picture. It was a kind of surprising things for them. So you can understand how challenging it was. And next 10 minutes, I will be discussing how ICT, or I can say that Massive Open Online Course, we just launched, and how we just tried to convince people to join that course, and what kind of innovations we did on that particular course. So friends, especially in this part of India, it is a Bihar state. Here, there is a lot of migration, poverty, and majority of the farmers are below this small and marginal in category. They have less than 1 hectare of land. And due to migration, women are just managing their household activities. At the same time, they are managing agriculture. So they can't take much risk. And this was a kind of new technology for them, and they were not comfortable at all. So we did lot of meetings, lot of discussions. So those meetings and discussions were not sufficient. So we did lot of demonstration, field demonstration. And after that, we did some field days also. So the kind of scale was so limited, only 5 villages we were working. So then we decided how we can go for a large scale, how we can go for our learning, whatever learning, interesting things we have, how we can tell the rest of the world. Then we decided we had to plan that is called massive open online course on conservation agriculture based sustainable intensification. So this was 6 weeks course, and but yes, before launching we had a lot of brainstorming whether same pedagogy will be there, because you know that MOOCs courses basically started from 2012 onwards, and majority of across the world, majority of the MOOCs are designed for the other students and academicians. And we decided to launch this particular course for the farming communities or other stakeholders who are promoting conservation agriculture. So that was a kind of challenge. But we got a lot of success, I'm telling you. Altogether, 7,390 people participated. And you can see here, around 80% participants were below 30 years of age. And interesting thing, around 31% were female and remaining 69% were male. And you can see here, we launched this course in AG MOOCs platform, which is exclusive for agriculture. But you can see here, there is no as such category for the farmers or entrepreneur. So our farmers registered under individual category. And it was quite challenging. So mostly because we thought that we are not dealing with the students, so we had to go for more about the demonstration. So in first week itself, we discussed about the basic concept and what is that. We shown them machineries, and later on we demonstrated those machineries, which is required for the conservation agriculture, and followed by we discussed about the agronomical things, and we tried to demonstrate instead of more about the lecture kind of things. And then what are those challenges, what are those advantages, and then at the last week we just thought that we have to discuss somehow if somebody would like to become service provider or a startup, would like to start a startup, so how they can do that. So it was a kind of 6 weeks module, and we implemented. So here's 30 videos we just developed, and rather than that we also did kind of transcripts in the form of audio as well. At the same time, what we did, the course was in Hindi, and we also gave some subtitle in English also. If other people also would like to participate, so they can. And then the most challenging things, I will say that it was how we can just motivate farmers or rural youth or other stakeholders, extension professional to participate. Because most of the time when you offered the course, massive open online course for the students, so we used to give a advertisement in website, and they are very much updated. They used to search those portals and platforms, and but here the challenge was how to motivate. So we adopted some innovations. Like in India, we have a lot of WhatsApp groups. So we just did a small advertisement and we shared on those personalized communication we did. Then we have one YouTube channel where 3.8 lakhs subscribers we have. So we developed one video advertisement and we did there, and whatever the question and queries came, we tried to reply. Not only this, we just tried what are those people who are very much active in YouTube and developing agriculture-based content. We also requested them to give our advertisement. Other than that, in Facebook also we gave our advertisement. Other than that, in local newspaper, because we know. So in this, the interesting thing was that we had to understand where our farmers or youth are available. So mostly they are accessing Facebook or WhatsApp or YouTube. So we tried to capture. Other than that, we also gave a lot of advertisement. We have farmers fairs because more than 10,000 farmers used to visit on those fairs. So on that way, we motivated. So this was a kind of interesting thing for us. And during this, one interesting things happened because farmers are not just like a student, they have a lot of experience. They used to share. But sometimes if they are not comfortable while the writing, so there is a provision. They can just share their voice message and others can also participate on that discussion. And altogether more than 5,000 question and answers came out. And for promotion of this, we did one innovation, as I mentioned, that we have one YouTube channel and more than even 300 technical films and success story we uploaded. So what we did, we just used to publish one notice in our AG MOOCs portal that we will be available on this particular day and with time. If you are interested to discuss any queries or any questions, you can come to our YouTube live. And we have this number of subscriber in YouTube also, so they also got motivated and they also vice versa, they joined this our portal. So on that way, we try to just develop their experience into a knowledge, a kind of knowledge treasure. So that was a kind of good thing for this particular program. And then you can ask me whether these massive open online courses are sufficient for just transforming from awareness to developing intention to action by only just teaching one massive open online course through this digital platform, whether farmers will adopt this technology. Answer is no. Because what interesting thing we got that during first few weeks, means first or second weeks, questions were in this forum. The questions were more about what is that concept, what is that, and more about what is that. Followed by the questions are more about how to do the things, Just tell us detail how to do the things and something like that. But I can say that if you would like to transform into action, so we have to go again for more number of capacity building, demonstration. But yes, this kind of massive open online courses are very much successful for the farming community. But we have to conduct a robust research in terms of their participation, their engagement, their needs, even about the learning outcomes. And we also conducted a kind of post survey also, and we got that response from the farming community. They are not interested at all more about the certificates, but they are more about interested about the knowledge. And they also develop a kind of network with us. And after this course, and we also gave our mobile number and other contact details. If they have any queries, they can contact us. Still, we are doing hand-holding for them. So that is very much required. So I would like to conclude my presentation here. Friends, if you would like to design massive open online courses for the farming community and other stakeholders of agriculture, so first of all, that is, we have to just think about the pedagogy of that particular thing. Things should be based on the problem or needs of the farming community. Second, about the promotion of that particular course should not be as usual what we used to do for the students, because they are not available on those platforms where our students are available. Third, learning, I can say that by these courses, we can reach up to intention. We can develop kind of cognitive things, but ultimately converting into action, we had to do a kind of capacity building and demonstration. But yes, these courses are very much beneficial for the farming community and other stakeholders. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ram, for giving us those details about the MOOC that was conducted, that was developed and conducted by BAU and CIMMYT. And a reminder to put your questions in the Q&A window if you have a question for more generally for the panel or for specific speakers. So the previous speakers have really talked, I guess, about connecting, research and extension in terms of how you transmit for information. The next speaker is Mr. Shashank Kumar, who worked alongside the SRFSI project in Bihar, and his company also works in other Indian states to link farmers to information, inputs and markets using a specific approach that he will explain called the DeHaat approach. So this incorporates an app and other ICT approaches as well as physical warehouses and shop fronts to connect farmers with markets and information. So over to you. Thank you, Shashank.
Hi everyone, my name is Shashank. I'm co-founder and CEO of DeHaat. DeHaat is a tech-based platform helping Indian farmers to provide them complete end-to-end agricultural services. It's a full-stack platform connecting Indian farmers with multiple agricultural businesses in an efficient as well as transparent manner. Through this platform, DeHaat, we have been helping our farmers at each and every stage of their farming cycle, right from crop selection, agri-input linkage, advising them for sustainable agricultural practices, getting access to finance, and last, not the least, and probably the most important thing is the market linkage of farm produce. So at DeHaat, what we have done, that one side, we have brought hundreds of agricultural businesses together on a single platform. So there are hundreds of agri-input manufacturers, there are hundreds of agri-output buyers, there are financial institutions, there are logistic companies, warehousing companies, and everyone. These are the entities who have got some business proposition for farmers, but what they do not have is direct access to farmers. And DeHaat as a platform brings this direct access to farmers for these businesses. On the other end of platform, we have millions of Indian farmers. So as on date at DeHaat, we are working with more than 500,000 farmers, roughly 600,000 farmers. They are active on our platform. Day-to-day basis, they get connected with these businesses, either for input or for output or for financing. And that's how they get benefited. When they buy agri-input, they save some cost. They get advisory directly from us as a platform, and that's where they experience better yield of the produce. When they get market for the produce, they get better price. And then when they get access to finance, we help them to reduce their cost of cultivation. How these services are available, considering in India, most of the farmers are small, with average land holding of just 1 to 2 hectares. So just one level above farmers' network, DeHaat has been building its own network of micro-entrepreneurs. And these micro-entrepreneurs are somewhat from the same local community, responsible to manage the last mile in a catchment area of 3 to 5 kilometers. So in total, on our platform, there are 3 actors: farmers, micro-entrepreneurs, and these agricultural businesses. So as on date, on a single platform, we have more than 800 unique agricultural businesses. There are more than 2,600 DeHaat micro-entrepreneurs, and then there are roughly 600,000 farmers. And all these entities, they keep interacting with each other, they keep transacting with each other, and they get benefited in a sustainable manner. As a platform, we manage the entire communication as well as the logistics. So in terms of ICT, which is a strong enabler in this entire execution, because that's the only reason why we are in a position to manage such a large operation. Because all these 600,000 farmers on day-to-day basis, they are buying something, they are selling something, they are raising their advisory related queries. Every day, we are aggregating close to 1,500 metric tons of produce from farmers and then selling to these corporates. Every day, we are delivering more than 12,000 agri-input orders from agri-input suppliers to farmers. Every month, we are spending more than 2 million minutes with farmers while advising them for sustainable agricultural practices and so on. All these things are possible only because of technology. Because while doing all these things, at any given point of time, as DeHaat, we know everything. Who you are as a farmer, what are you buying, what you are selling, what sort of queries you are asking, and we have been generating a lot of data sets. And because of this data set, because there are different products, there are different tech interfaces for each of these actors. For farmers, there is a helpline number, which is voice-based technology where they communicate if they are a feature phone user, or there is an app if they're a smartphone user in vernacular language. That's how they communicate. Then there is another tech interface for these micro entrepreneurs, where irrespective of their background, from very first day, they get to know what exactly they have to do, whether they have to deliver agri input or they have to aggregate the farm produce, how they have to manage their farmers' data and everything. And then there are interfaces for our buyers and suppliers. So all these tech interfaces, it keeps interacting and coordinating with each other. And that's how we generate a lot of data sets. And then we use these data sets to improve our internal efficiency, as well as basically we bring lots of efficiency as well as transparency in this entire execution in terms of yield forecast, in terms of inventory forecast, in terms of scoring of farmers, scoring the land parcel and whatnot. So, and not just that, recently we have started using technology for going one level deeper. We have started digitizing the land parcel as well, where now we are digitizing the farm boundaries of those farmers so that the advisory we are offering to farmers that can be even more customized. Since recently we have integrated financial services on our platform, this digitizing farm boundary, that's going to be a game changer for those farmers. And that's the reason why DeHaat aims to bring everything related to agriculture under one roof for these farmers. Whereas a platform, our role is just twofold, to connecting these farmers to all these agricultural businesses or various agricultural touch points in an efficient manner as well as transparent manner. And then the second responsibility is to manage the last mile, where we have our DeHaat micro entrepreneurs. So ladies and gentlemen, I think it's just the technology why we could scale up this model. You'll be amazed to hear that every month we are adding approximately 300 DeHaat micro entrepreneurs. Why? Because the onboarding process of any individual DeHaat micro entrepreneur is completely digital. It's 100% on our app. And that's the reason why we are in a position to add 300 micro entrepreneurs every month. Every month we are acquiring, onboarding more than 35,000 farmers. That's all because of technology. And that's the reason why DeHaat has an ambitious goal to aggregate more than 30 million Indian farmers. DeHaat is aiming to build more than 35,000 DeHaat micro entrepreneurs network in next 4 years. That's all from my side as DeHaat. When we are using ICT to provide farmers a bundle of agricultural value chain services. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Shashank. I think that was a really interesting example of the scale of the connections that can be made in terms of the number of different businesses that can be connected through your networks, and including using ICT, and also the scale of your ambition, which is really interesting. And there's some good questions coming through that we'll get to when we get to the Q&A session. If you've got any other questions, please put them in the Q&A window. We just have one final presentation, and then we will open up, we'll get the speakers to turn their videos on, and then we'll be having a Q&A session. So the final presentation, I guess, is a little bit different. It's from Professor Basant Maheshwari, who's been working on local groundwater management options in India for about the last decade. And groundwater is really the basis for agriculture in most parts of South Asia. And so using local methods and ICT to improve its management can enhance resource use to support agriculture. Thanks, Basant. Over to you now.
Greetings from Sydney, Australia. It is my pleasure to share some of the experiences from the project called MARVI. The title of my talk is Inform and Inspire to Empower Citizens, Participatory Groundwater Monitoring and ICT at the village level for Sustainable Groundwater Futures. Let's talk about the problem of groundwater. Groundwater levels have fallen too deep in South Asia and many parts of the world. What used to be 10 to 15 meters deep, now it is gone up to 500 meters or more. And this has created water scarcity for agriculture, drinking purposes, and industry needs. The solution to groundwater problems, some people suggested control the groundwater use by enacting some laws and criminalize if someone breaks the law. Some people have come up with technical solutions such as have a pump that operates when you insert a smart card and allows you to pump out allocated amount and stops when you have reached your limit. The question comes, what are the above solutions workable in reality and sustainable? And also, what kind of technology and technical solutions will really work under field situation? So before we talk about the solutions, why do we have groundwater problems? It is because of the greed. People want to use as much as they can. And we have limited knowledge because it's underground and we don't have enough data for a given situation. And so there's a lack of understanding in general about what is happening, what we are doing to our groundwater. And this is related to people, and we need to work on what can be done. So we need people-friendly, technical, social, and policy solutions. Now, coming to MARVI projects. So MARVI stands for Managing Aquifer Recharge and Sustaining Groundwater Use through Village-Level Interventions. And it focused on 3 key activities: participatory data collection, sharing information and building understanding, engaging with policymakers, government agencies, groundwater users, and other stakeholders. The project involved 9 organizations with Western Sydney University as the lead partner, and there were 30 researchers and 35 farmer researchers, and it was funded by Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research and now being funded by Australian Water Partnership and running since 2011. There were 2 study locations, one in Rajasthan and the other one is Gujarat. And both study areas had about 5,000 hectares in land area, and the rainfall is about 600 millimeters per year. And so there are 4 key actors in the MARVI project. So the researchers and the Bhujal Jankars, which means the Bhujal means groundwater and Jankar means informed. So these are the village volunteers. I will talk more about them, and they are the key people. And the schools and communities, their involvement, and the Gram Panchayat and state and central government agencies. So they are the 4 key actors in MARVI project. The Bhujal Jankars, they are the engaged local volunteers, and we had 25 of them in Rajasthan and 10 in Gujarat, and they went through basic hydrogeologic training, mapping, water table measurements, water quality measurements, and they were given this training over about 8 to 9 months. And they really became champions and interface between research team and community. They felt very empowered and valued. So what did we really do in the MARVI project? So we trained BJs and worked with them on ongoing basis, collected groundwater depth, rainfall amount, water quality, checked them water levels and socioeconomic data. We worked with local schools and community groups, worked with Gram Panchayat and state government agencies, developed tools and resources for data collection, analysis, capacity building, and ICT was part of this, and connected with policymakers at the state and central government levels. So monitoring the groundwater levels. So we kept the technology as simple as possible. So this is one of the BJs called, his name is Hariram. And all we have is a float and a measuring tape. And he just lowers this tape in the well. And this he does every week. So all these BJs, 35 of them, they monitored 250 wells in Rajasthan and 110 in Gujarat, and they were doing on weekly basis. This picture shows we also installed groundwater sensors to back up the BJ collected data. And this picture shows the training of BJs in measuring rainfall, and they were given training on other things as well. This picture shows the automatic weather station, and that was also important to back up the data collected by BJs and schools and so on. And these BJs went for training, and these BJs are local farmers and other community members. And they left school a long time ago, but they have life experience. And they went through this training of hydrogeology, developing maps, developing land use maps, water balance analysis, and so on. So they were given training over 8 to 9 months in the first year. This picture shows the training in action in the study area. So this picture shows they were given training in measuring water quality. They are measuring here the water table depth. This is some training in the classroom situation. And over here, one of the BJs marking the wells, putting some ID on these wells. BJs also monitor the check dams, and check dams are basically some sort of dam constructed across the stream and water impounds upstream, and that helps to have more groundwater recharge through the stream bed. And during this project, we had large number of meetings with village communities to discuss their groundwater issues and really work with them to develop their own groundwater management solutions. Since we were collecting so many data every week, and so we needed some system or some help, and so we created this app called MyWell, and this can measure, can record water table depth, rainfall, water quality, check dam water level, and so the BJs, after measuring those parameters, they will put these values into this app, and that way the data collected are available to wider community, and they can see the trends in various parameters, and really created that interest in managing groundwater. This picture shows meeting in one of the villages, showing how this app works. and really helping to evaluate the effectiveness of the app. This app shows one of the farmers using the MyWell app. And all this data collection really helped to visualize water table fluctuation in local wells, and that really helped to understand how it is varying from month to month, year to year. And again, this one shows the water table fluctuation in number of wells in a given village. And also this data collection has helped to understand the check dam water balance. So if we have a check dam, how much water is stored there, how much goes into the groundwater, how much is evaporated, and that way we have better understanding of how much groundwater is available in the local area for irrigation in the next season. So the key messages from the Marvi work is, for managing and sustaining groundwater, we need information on 4 aspects: groundwater levels, rainfall, water quality, check dam water levels. And so if we have the above information, we can understand what is happening in terms of groundwater use and recharge. It is important to remember that we are solving the problem that was created by people. And so any good solution needs to involve them. Any use of technology, ICT, should work with people, not remove them from the scene and alienate them. Also, technology can be used for training and capacity building. So like e-learning through short videos, online platforms for specific self-paced learning. Thank you. And more information about Marvi is available on the website.
Thanks very much, Basant. That was a really interesting example of using ICT, I guess using ICT as a tool in a project that helps manage groundwater. We do have, and thanks to all our speakers for providing really interesting and practical examples of how ICT can help promote connections in agricultural systems. We do have about 30 minutes now for a quick Q&A session. So I'll ask the speakers to turn your videos on now, if possible. So joining us in the Q&A session, we have Brendan Brown, Emma Karki, Ram Datt, and standing in, representing DeHart, we have Nikhil Toshnewal, who's the Vice President of Digital and New Initiatives at DeHart, and also Professor Basant Maheshwari. We do have a lot of questions, so thanks to everyone who's posted those, and keep them coming in. If you have got something that you need to you want to ask, we're either, as I said, to a specific panelist or to just to the panel more generally. I think we'll start off. So if we can ask the panel, this is a kind of general question to the panel. Can you explain more about how users can have input into the design of your digital tools? And it would be really interesting if you could give some specific examples. I would ask Brendan to start to answer that first, because you also have the paper that you did some research into that. So if you can, explain a little bit more about how users can have input into the design of digital tools and how important that is, that would be helpful. Thanks, Brendan.
Sure, thanks, Tamara. Reflecting on the manuscript that we've published there, one of the key things that did come out was there has to be some level of interactivity that comes through in these tools. So how do you start to build that in? And it pieces into some of the work that we looked at in terms of information preferences. People want connectivity. People want to feel like they're in a farmer group or having that sort of interaction. As to how you do that, I'm definitely the wrong person to be talking about that. Certainly there's a need for it. but I wouldn't say I have any answers as to how you do it. Others might.
Okay, thanks, Brendan. It's good to highlight the importance of that anyway, and it's good that obviously that came out in your research. I wonder, Nikhil, if you have any comments on that in terms of how you in DeHart interact with users and get input into the design of your digital tools.
Sure. And thank you so much for inviting me for this. So basically, there are a number of use cases where things get really interesting and tricky to be collected on ground by the farmers, by the way they understand. For example, if I give you just an insight where the farmer is using a sprinkler irrigation or a drip irrigation. Now that's a question for us to provide them right advisories. So how to get that information being filled out? So we did a number of campaigns, and one of the campaign was just like, we send them a web link for the farmers where an SMS with a link to that, so that a farmer opens up a link and it suggests that, hey, this is by how much you can, I would say save water by having a right irrigation method. And then we just ask that click a selfie from the area we have an irrigation equipment with, and there was just a drop down, sprinkler or drip irrigation. You'd be happy to know that, within an hour of our sending out this information, we were able to collect thousands of the farmers replying by the selfies with the sprinkler. And the good part is that over here with this mechanism, we were also able to get the coordinates of their farms. So we got the coordinate, we got a photo, and we also got to know that what are the farmers, what kind of irrigation equipment which they have been using. So this is just one of a method, there could be enough methods into the smartphones itself, app itself. It only depends that, yes, it's good. What is important to understand is that also the farmers are as the digital wave is coming, the farmers are also getting aware about those methods. We just have to step out by just asking the input details over a drop downs, over something visual, video-based designs. And those things definitely help them to able to coordinate and communicate better and understand. So that's one of a use case which I just want to highlight.
Thanks very much, Nikhil. That's really interesting, using the visuals as well to capture the feedback from those local users. Basant, I wonder if you can comment on how in the Marvi project you actually had input into the design of your MyWell app, just briefly.
Sure, Tamara, thank you. We started the development of MyWell probably in 2014, and it has gone through lots of ideas. And so one example I want to give is we thought we can convey the information, get the information about groundwater levels and rainfall through SMS, and then transmit back through SMS. But within a year, we realized that the internet is becoming widely available. So we switched over from the SMS to sending data through internet. And then also we realized that not always internet is available in remote villages. So we changed, the farmers asked, we can't use the internet in particular locations. So we changed the app to store the data, and when internet becomes available, it's automatically uploaded. Another example which was becoming important. So we talked to Central Groundwater Board and said, look, these farmers are collecting rainfall and other data, but they questioned that how can we trust these people that they collect accurately? So we introduced a photo taking thing in the app. So if they are measuring rainfall, they take a photo of the rain gauge, how much rainfall, and then it takes the time and location, and that satisfies the sort of reliability required. So there were a few things like that.
Thank you. That's very similar to actually Nikhil's response. So that's interesting that you've both gone down that path. Thank you very much. Another question is again a general question to the panelists. Wondering if you can comment on the role of peer learning and the role of this in not only education but adoption. And I was wondering if Emma, if you could make any comments on that just as an initial start, and then if other panelists would like to also contribute, you can do so after Emma.
Can you hear me, Tamara?
Yes, yep, I can. Yep.
I think in terms of learning, it's good to get sort of both sides. I think in the visual syllabus, what we did was trying to get information, what was needed, and then also trying to understand if the information we're providing is also accurate. So I'm not sure if I answered exactly what you said, but if somebody else wants to have a stab at it.
Yeah, I think it was also about peer learning, and I think you did make the point in your presentation about the fact that you did address some of the, so in some of the cases, you did address some of the kind of social barriers as well. So you incorporated that into your visual syllabus. And how, I was just wondering how important that was, do you think, in the development of that and the kind of messages you were trying to get across?
I can jump in, if that's all right. So part of what we did try and do, as Tamara, you've said, was not to make a professor standing in a wheat field talking about why Cassie was good. There's many videos it's been done to death, I would say. So the approach that we took was to actually get farmers to be actors, get service providers to be actors, to try and increase that element of authenticity in what we were trying to do. We would have loved to have tested if that worked. COVID got in our way of actually testing how that actually played out. But it was certainly part of that design, and particularly, again, going back to that research that says, I think it's something like 30% of respondents across the region said that their preferred source of information was other farmers or farmer groups. So it's definitely a way that they want to learn about things, and that was our attempt to piece that in.
Thanks, Brendan. Yes, go ahead, Emma.
Oh, yeah, I think just adding to that, as Brendan said, we didn't want to create another video that just explains what it is, but try to capture sort of social barriers, such as when you are shifting your technology to something that goes against what's traditionally being done, you will face a lot of mockery, or people will call you stupid. And we wanted to recognize that just because the technology works does not mean it's easy to bring it and then just start using it, because it does require that change in attitude. And I guess the videos will try to show that you transition from the community laughing at you, and then you sort of have to prove the technology. And then there's that behavioral change. So that doesn't happen just because you've proven the technology, but you want to see it in someone else's farm, and you want to observe because you're not really in a position to take risks regardless. So I think that was the objective of our visual syllabus.
Thanks, Emma. There's another question, and I think Ram, you're probably well placed to answer this. In audiences with low literacy, to what extent are digital technologies applicable?
Thank you, Tamara. Yeah, thank you, Tamara. I think this is a good question. Actually, especially there is a myth prevailing whenever we talk about the ICT, so how they will use it. Especially in Indian context, just after coming Geo, the cost of data is reduced like anything, and rural people are using social media and other things. So I think when we were discussing about how we can move our learning and scale out our learnings to masses, then we decided we will go for the MOOCs. So it was the question that there is a low literacy rate, so how we can go for. But I would like to mention here, then we discussed that most of the farmers, they can't write, but through only voice, they ask about the crop from YouTube, from Google. Even they are using those videos just after through that with the help of voice recorded and things. So the point is that, and interesting things I would like to tell about MOOCs when we conducted, it was a very interesting learning for us. There were a feature about the recording. So if you can't write, you can record it, you can send while the discussion. More than 5,000 questions we received and answers and discussion in forum. So in that forum, they can only record the voice and they can send. Others people used to respond. So it was kind of. So literacy is no more barrier for ICT now, what I feel.
So if I can add to Dr. Ram as suggested, and this is where what you feel is that that's a main gameplay of ICT, to provide information to the people who may not be having a smartphone, who may not be able to type, but everybody knows that the people are a communicator. They can communicate. So in that case, we have seen that, and if we take it in the global context, the African regions have proved that. So at DeHaat, we have IVRS system under which any farmer who's not having a smartphone, yet they get a call, an automated call recorded in the human accent, and they would say, this is the 3rd week of your seed which you have sown, and this is the time for you to just add the starter, this booster. This is the time for you to spray. In that case, we have found that people listen to it, and then they kind of wait for the call to come, because we have been following the cycle that they will wait for, just like every 10 a.m. there's a call. They'll wait for it. Okay, what's sent for today, and that's what we do. So it was a kind of, very, there was a massive hysteria that how we can communicate to the farmer on a daily basis about what to do on the farm if they're not on smartphones. But yes, IVRS proved that. And that's where I would say the beauty of ICT is. And that's where the major innovation is yet to see the overall impact, what it can have over the small and marginal farmers.
Okay, so I think, that highlights that there's still some pretty simple things that you can use with ICT that can still have a big impact. And I think, Brendan, you also highlighted that, the WhatsApp groups and some of those things were actually still really important in the project that you were working on too.
I think simplicity, at least, is part of the key there. The problem is when you're trying to communicate complex system changes, and you've got a very limited scope for how you communicate in that. Something that we actually thought about with those videos, and it becomes quite obvious. We filmed them in Bangla. We had intentions of filming them in other languages. Didn't happen, so we went the subtitle route. We talked about dubbing, but we came to the point where we thought you actually lose your authenticity and what we were trying to achieve there by not doing that. So I think the solution or the answer to that is you've got to have budgets and the ability to record in lots of different languages if you want to reach lots of different people, and particularly in low literacy situations. I just wanted to add two more points. The first one was we did a little bit of research, informal research around how people access smartphones. And what we found was there's probably one in every household. The mother will call in the son and say, show me this on the phone. So she doesn't actually need to type something into the phone, but she can still access that information. So there's workarounds within the family unit. As long as one person has a smartphone, there is access. The second one, and it addresses one of the other questions, was around where I see some opportunity. I actually see opportunity in digital extension services for the extension officers. So they're ones that are likely to have a little bit better connectivity, probably have a better phone, and they also have trust often in the community. So if you can actually get them integrated with knowledge through ICT extension, I think that there's that link between everybody's always going to preference in-person extension. And particularly low literacy people or in South Asia, often particular castes are always going to preference in person. So if you can upskill those extension services through ICT, that could be a pathway, an intermediary pathway. Thanks.
In continuation with Brendan, I would like to mention here, in this MOOCs course, we recorded our video in Hindi and we gave a subtitle in English. So many people from the Kenya, Nigeria, even African countries participated. So, and they used to even ask questions and we tried to reply in English. So I don't think so even language or other things. And Brendan is very right. We did survey and every household, more or less, they have a smartphone. And they used to ask from their son or daughter to show videos or and interestingly, 80% are respondents in MOOCs, they were below 30 years of age. So it shows that they are participating and their parents used to even see those videos and other things.
Thank you. Thanks all for those responses. Yes, Emma?
Yeah, if I could add, I think what Brendan mentioned was, we would in our interviews we would go with the head of the household who would be a male, but we had women who would say, well, I don't really have time to attend these meetings. I am interested to know what the technology is about. So when you do have information on a cell phone, especially in a video, I cook and watch what's going on. I can do my household chores and still be aware of what's going on. And it's not that she's necessarily participating on field, but she's still very aware of what is happening in her village, in her community, and perhaps the technology that's being used in her own farm. So, yeah.
Thanks, Emma, for that addition. There's a specific question for Basant about Marvi. Can you talk about your 2 biggest challenges and your 2 biggest successes, and what the appropriate role for international partners is to play in supporting your efforts in terms of monitoring groundwater?
Sure, Tamara. Yeah. I just replied on the Q&A, this chat box. But what I would like to say is the biggest success is we were able to prove that farmers can collect reliable data. And farmers respond well if their peers are explaining to them what is happening to their groundwater, and they listen and they act on this. So I think the idea of this Bhujal Jankar or BJs is really very valuable in terms of they act as an interface between the farming community and the researchers. And also they are being local, so they are always there. And so there is an ongoing sort of engagement. And in terms of what international partners can do, I think I strongly feel we need to do more capacity building in terms of understanding groundwater, what they can do, how they can understand in terms of water balance and those things at their level. And then they start acting. So if they have the information, understanding, and I think that's what we observed, and that's what is needed. And also, groundwater is so complicated in terms of, because it's underground, you can't really control, and there are no regulations, especially countries like India or other countries in South Asia. And so we really need work with them, and for not 2-3 years, much longer, to really get some good impacts. And transdisciplinary approach is very important. It's not a technical issue alone, but you need to think about women and groundwater, or social, economic, policy. It need to bring all together to really have some change. So these are some of the learnings from us.
Thanks, Basant. That's really interesting. And I think, again, I mean, this seminar is all about connections. And I think all of the speakers and you've really shown, the connections between the different actors in the network and how that can be strengthened. So that's really interesting. We've got probably about 10 minutes left. And there's a question that's come up about how has COVID-19 affected work in ICT development and implementation? I think that's very timely, given that we're all still grappling with the impacts of COVID. So I'm wondering if different panel members have got can give examples in their own work of how COVID has, I guess, how either ICT has helped to adapt to the COVID, different kind of COVID restrictions, or how it's affected development of ICT. Nikhil, do you have any examples from DeHart network in terms of using ICT and how that COVID has impacted that? You're on mute, Nikhil.
So indeed, like, as Shashank mentioned, that one of the key important part was onboarding of our micro entrepreneurs. Before COVID, there was still movement of physical team into getting the KYC being done, recording a video of the micro entrepreneur. With the COVID, we jumped into completely digital approach under which a micro entrepreneur has to download an app. He uploads his licenses, creates a video, KYC, everything digital. And that has taken off all the loads on the physical team. And that is why the reason is that, having 300 micro entrepreneurs being onboarded without no person on the ground. And thanks to, so this is like, one of the impact of the COVID. During the COVID, we definitely didn't see any kind of, thought to have our people or the ground people being risked into it. And that is where this digital thing come into it. And currently we don't, even if we are being given a chance to go back, there's no reason to go back into this physical approach. So that's one of the thing. Then comes that, lead generation, the ticketing generation for a farmer facing a pest issue. So now we massively invested time and efforts into making the ticketing solution over WhatsApp, over IVRS, or over a smartphone, under which farmers have to just click a photograph, or he just calls up, and then there is an AI engine which suggests that which crop, what kind of pest, and based on that, a ticket is being raised for a person to just call back and answer. And in case of WhatsApp, he gets an answer for the output, for the input which he can use. So that's on the farmer side. On the ME side, there have been massive development because of less movement. And this has definitely boosted interest of the farmers, where they have the talks about digital things have more increased. So I guess this has led to better awareness among the farmers, and the adoption rate, though it's going to increase, but yet having a few winners, then the peer-to-peer learning is going to solve a massive problem.
Again, it's, I guess, the links between or the more traditional extension approaches alongside the ICT approaches. Thank you, Nikhil. Yes, Ram?
Tamar, I would like to add here. Actually, there is a, now we call new normal situation for us. And especially we conducted during this, since last 2 years, I can say, from just after coming COVID-19, we used to conduct online trainings. Previously, we used to call farmers to come our Krishi Vigyan Kendras, that university. Now they used to connect through this, in fact, online platforms and other things. So the cost of training is basically reduced like anything, and their time while the visiting our, in fact, institute, and it was a kind of costly affair for them to visit and a lot of time and other things. So due to this, I think that is an interesting change what we are practicing here.
And I know, Ram, that the MOOC was actually running, it started just before COVID hit. And I remember there was a big uptake in registrations even after COVID. So that I think the second half was kind of in the COVID sphere. So you also benefited in a way from the MOOC being ready and already underway when COVID hit.
You are indeed, you are absolutely right. We started this around April or somewhere, and we got suddenly change a number of participants enrolled in this. So suddenly what we did, we again started another MOOC course. It was in that related to entrepreneurship and startups. So we thought that now people are in fact ready to use this. So we started another one. It was really great.
Emma, do you have any thoughts on how COVID impacted? I know it did impact your work in terms of the visual syllabus. If you want to cover that again.
Yeah, I think one of our big plans was to screen this in the communities where we filmed, or even in our study locations, and that's something that could not happen. And we had plans to go back and, as Brendan mentioned, record in other languages, because it's in Bangla, but if you want to hear it or read it, it's subtitled, but that's not always possible for everybody. And I think we had plans to record more, as I said in my presentation, and all those things are sort of put on hold because of COVID. And I think we really wanted to show that the video that we've come up with, we've tried to use a bottoms-up approach in getting topics from farmers instead of the other way around. So it's sad that we didn't get to showcase that and get their own reaction and feedback that would help us develop other videos.
I'll tag on to that. Thanks, Emma, and say one of the reflections that I have is probably around local capacity to actually create content for ICT services. So one of the things we will admit to when we filmed that first chapter is we got an Australian video maker to come in. What we did also try to do though is with Ramdat and others at Bihar Agricultural University was to bring some of their media team over. Now they have a whole media unit in their university. Really, if you look at their YouTube channel, it's got a lot of hits, probably more than Simit has. So they're doing really well. So trying to make sure there is some capacity there. So in situations like we have with COVID, obviously this was pre-COVID, we didn't know about it. And in the end, we weren't able to film more chapters for various reasons. But it does highlight the importance of having the capacity in more regional and local institutions to create that content without necessarily needing to fly internationals from developed countries in to make that content.
Thanks, Brendan. Does anyone else have any comments about COVID?
I would like to add something here, Tamara. So I think as human, we adapt to challenges, and that's what I found. So before COVID, we were having meetings and the partners will just attend the meeting casually and not that professional. But I think within 2 months of when this COVID really hit, they become very good in attending Zoom meetings and prepared and like that. That's one thing. And then we wanted to do some training. So it was hard to work with farmers on, something video on in a room and they're watching. But I think slowly we developed some good learning material and distributed, and it started working. So it takes time. It was challenging, but I think it showed that some things can be done online and some really need face-to-face. So it was a good experience. It can work.
Thank you, Basant. Sorry, just a final question, I guess, more generally to the panelists. We just have a few minutes left. But another one of the questions that I think is interesting is about how you quantify the impact of ICT. So we've got, you've all talked about the examples of using ICT, but can you very quickly talk also about how you can quantify the impact of having that and implementing that, those different forms of ICT? Ram, I know you talked a little bit about this in your presentation because it was something that you also felt that you needed to kind of follow up on.
Yes, I think actually in this online platform, this is very easy to take feedback because how many people are active and what time, everything is recorded there. So we can see it was really interesting when people used to interact and we can get all the data. So with that, it is quite easy to know about their interaction, who is interacting, who is not interacting, everything we can record. And after that, we also conducted one post survey about the learning outcomes, how it was interesting.
Thanks, Ram. Brendan, did you have a comment to make there?
I was going to say we probably might be using the wrong word there around impact. I think it's probably more focused around outcomes. So some of the work that we're doing from a large quantitative survey of around 5,000 farmers across the region was look at the outcomes of training. So looking at the general population, looking at the trained population, where did they get to in an adoption process? So we weren't able to do that with ICT because we didn't have a large enough set of respondents that had participated in ICT or had responded that way within our data set. But it's certainly possible to start trying to tie particular individuals who've taken certain trainings, be it ICT or otherwise, and look at their adoption process and where they are in that process.
Okay, thanks very much, Brendan, and thanks again to the panel, to all the speakers. You've given some really concrete examples of how you've used ICT very practically to connect research, extension, farmers, markets, to manage information, to manage input supplies, to link different entrepreneurs and market and with markets and resources. And I found it really interesting. I think, the Food Systems Summit is on this week. And obviously the whole topic of that is about transforming food systems and highlighting the need for that. And I think you've given some really concrete examples, as I said, of how we can support this transformation with ICT. Just before we finish, I would like to remind participants that the next event in this series will be held on the 5th of October, which focuses on innovations in entrepreneurship and with a focus on youth there. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us today and best wishes. Thank you very much.